I'm listening to your show.
The point that there's limited news
I just want
coverage.
to know what your viewpoint is.
Do because major news organizations have been told on, what they can report on.
The People's Voice. Welcome back. Welcome back to The People's Voice. I am Trey Evans. Appreciate you guys checking me out again this week. This week I've got an interesting topic. I don't know what type of conversation this will lead to, but it was something that in my research, this was accidentally popped up in my research. I actually was researching a different topic, and I use Google and YouTube and any other media channel that anyone else would use when researching various topics to discuss on the podcast. And so I'm flipping through YouTube, and in my suggestions, where they show you like the video suggestions, things that they recommend you watch or that you might be interested in, there was a video of a new music video of 4, how do you say it? I don't want to call old, but legacy acts. That's what they call them. Legacy acts, R&B, black male legacy acts. And apparently it's a new video, a new song from these gentlemen. They're not a group. Individually, they have all had solo careers, but and they have been parts of groups throughout the years. So the topic that I want to discuss today is hair dye, right? Because I am watching the video, and these 4 gentlemen, I know them, and in terms of their, being professional singers, because, they've been singing well over multiple decades. Let's just say that, because I was a teenager when many of these men were, I guess the new act, or, midway through their careers. And now again, I guess they would be considered legacy acts. But the reason I came up with the topic was because as I'm watching the video, I noticed that all 4 gentlemen, who I'm pretty sure were above the age, or I'm pretty sure are of or above the age of 50, none of them had gray hair. And it was one of those situations where it was so noticeable, particularly if you, like someone as such as myself, knows these gentlemen in terms of their artistry. And I'm like, wow, what is it about hair dye? And so the topic today is about hair dye. And I'm on purpose not saying their names, because I my show is not about, this podcast is not about being negative, but, and I don't know how someone would take it if, I started naming names. But, for those of you who know the video, it's no secret. It's a new song. It's 4 legacy R&B acts that came together to sing a song, and you guys can research it on Google and YouTube and Instagram or whatever else. But the topic today is about hair dye. And I wanted to understand, or I guess get a sense of why hair dye, particularly among men, is becoming such a popular thing to do, particularly older men. Now, I have gray hair. I don't dye my hair. I don't have a full head of gray hair, but I've got gray hairs. I'm of that age of when you begin to, develop gray hair. I think gray hair is almost like a sign of passage, right? It means that I've lived I lived a life, and I've been able to get to the point where my hair is beginning to lose its melanin. And so I wanted to just research, hair dye and kind of get an understanding of it. And it was interesting because doing the research, I uncovered that, hair dyeing goes back, to the Greek and Roman empires. I mean, it's obviously evolved over the hundreds and thousands of years. But this is a practice that goes way back to those times. And so I wanted to look at hair dye and get an understanding just about its popularity. And doing the research, I went through many different articles, and I went through one article which kind of explained that hair dyeing, for the most part, from all the articles that I read, was about vanity, right? People are just resistant when it comes to letting themselves go through the aging process. There is a undeniable desire to hold on to your youth, and one of the easiest ways to do that is by coloring your hair. So that was one of the things that I uncovered, right? So that's not really, I guess, surprising, right? For those who color hair, or for those who know individuals who color their hair. Obviously, vanity is one of the things that people go to. Approximately, and I'm reading from an article from the Washingtonian, it says approximately 50% of the people will find that 50% of their hair is gray by the time they turn 50. And this was an interesting part of the research, because here in the United States, and again, I focus a lot of my research on the United States because this is what I'm familiar with. And, as I branch out into different topics, I'll begin to explore other areas of the world and trends and interesting news. But, for now, I'm focusing on the U.S. So here in the U.S., in doing the research, at each stage of hair turns gray for different races at different times, which I found astonishing. For African Americans, hair typically begins to turn gray somewhere in their 40s. In our 40s is when our hair typically starts to gray. For white Americans, it was in their 30s. And it's really interesting research, if you want to do it, about just understanding the reasons behind it, the different textures and lengths and width of hair, and how it is affected, and basically how gray hair, or I should say how hair turns from its original color to gray, is because there is a depletion of melanin in the hair follicle, which causes hair to turn gray. And like I said, it varies in individuals. And, despite many rumors, or many assumptions, I should say, it's not just, stress orientated. When somebody says, oh, she or he is so stressed out, hair is turning gray. Well, that actually doesn't affect it as much as people would think, because normally the stress comes with some other issues which can cause the hair to turn gray. But It's typically just not stress. But so again, I was focusing on hair dyeing in the United States. I wanted to understand why it was so popular. I was watching this video. I saw 4 grown men well over the age of 50 with jet black hair. And I know that they have gray hair. When I say jet black, I mean their hair on top of their head, mustache, beards, everything was jet black. And I was like, how is it that clearly this is just for the video, right? I hope, because you can't maintain that. Like, we know your hair is great, but that's neither here nor there. So let me give kind of an overview of the hair dye market. So globally, now I'm talking globally, the hair coloring market reached over $29 billion. Now I'm talking business now, right? Because obviously there is a business model behind this, right? So $29 billion was generated in 2019 in the hair coloring market. And that is expected to be increased to about 40 billion in 2023. In terms of areas where hair coloring is most popular, and this is globally, of course, number one, the United States of America, right? The home of the vein. The home of the vein right here. And then Europe, Asia, and then it kind of breaks it down into, China, Japan, India, and many Asian Pacific countries. So this is big money, right? So of course there has to be a consumer for it. And here in the United States, we are the number one consumers of hair coloring or hair dye. And of course, being that, we as a collective society in the United States are constantly chasing notoriety and popularity, it's no surprise that the U.S. is ranked number one in terms of hair coloring. Now, here was the thing that really kind of got me, because, again, this started because I saw 4 grown men with jet black hair, and I've obviously seen just in walking in the streets and then, going into stores and just living normal life, I'm seeing more men, especially above the age of 40, 45, 50, with no gray hair, right? This is like, it's really like a phenomenon. But as I was doing additional research regarding this, I also started to find out that not only is hair dye being driven, obviously, because of vanity, is also because of the rise in diabetes. And this is worldwide. I know, I thought the same thing. I was like, what? Like, what do you mean? So from what I've studied, right, and I got this information from WebMD, and also I was checking out American Cancer Society and several other sites. The link between diabetes and the increase in hair dyeing is that, and let me just go back, type 2 diabetes, one of the symptoms of that is that it can damage the melanin in your hair. And let me just go back. There's an article on diabetes from Bestline, and I just want to read it regarding the diabetes and how hair is affected by it. So it says, your health condition could also be causing you to go gray. This is especially the case if you suffer from diabetes, anemia, thyroid problems, or any of these illnesses are known for directly attacking your hair follicles. And this was based on a study that was conducted in Lima, Peru. It says, in fact, hair follicle damage is shown to be one of the early markers for type 2 diabetes. So again, this was very interesting in terms of research that diabetes is an indicator, that your hair follicles turning from your natural hair color to gray may be an indicator of type 2 diabetes. Not saying it is, it may be. But the interesting fact about it was that the hair dye industry watches this as an indicator and then is predicting that their revenues will be able to grow as a result of the increase in diabetes. And for those of you who don't know, diabetes is increasing worldwide, and it has to do with food consumption and how food is processed. Whole nother show, not going to get into it, but I thought that was interesting. The second interesting thing that I read about hair dye, and this is when it gets very, very concerning, because I don't know how many people know this. And this is from the American Society of Cancer. This is right from their website. Many people, there have been studies that have been done over the years that have linked hair dye with increasing cases of certain cancers. Most notably have been blood cancers, non-Hodgkin lymphoma, leukemia, and breast cancer. And the studies over the years have looked at two groups in particular. And those two groups have been either people who use hair dyes regularly or people who are exposed to them at work. And when I read that, I immediately thought about one of my best friends in the whole world. She is a hairstylist. She's been a hairstylist for decades. And she uses these dyes. And, that's one of the first things when I read this, and I shot her a text like, hey, check this out. Now, she, fortunately has not been diagnosed with any form of cancer, but based on the studies that have been done over the last few years, and this is from the American Society of Cancer. This is right from their website. They say, again, that people, and this is based on the studies that have been done over years, people who use hair dyes regularly and people who are exposed to them at work, this means people that use them for clients, have a higher increased chance or cases of, again, bladder cancer, lymphoma, leukemia, and breast cancer. In most studies, and I'm reading directly from the site, most studies of people exposed to hair dyes at work, such as hairdressers and barbers. This is the other thing, like I mentioned. A lot of men are getting their hair dyed. I see it all the time. They get their beards dyed. They go to the barbershop. They get a haircut. They get their beard dyed, or they get their entire hair dyed. So I'm going to read again. Most studies of people exposed to hair dyes at work, such as hairdressers and barbers, have found a small but fairly consistent increased risk of bladder cancer. The study goes on to say it also looked at people that get their hair dyed on a regular basis, and they did not see that same increase in bladder cancer, but they did see that increase in people who work with hair dyes. Now, here's the other part of the study that, of course, immediately raised concern. And this is from an NPR article. This is from an NPR article that I'm reading from. Alexandria White, who is a doctor, an author, and an investigator with the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, she did a study, or was part of a study, for 8 years. And what she found was that white women using hair dye, about 7% of white women saw an increase and potential breast cancers. In that same study, it was noted 45% of black women had an increased risk of developing breast cancer compared to 7% of white women that use hair dyes. And I can tell you, as being an African American male, I know many black women who use hair dyes. Now, the study does go on to say that even though the risk is higher among black women, it's higher when it comes to black women who have either dyed their hair permanently or for black women who have dyed their hair or dyed their hair frequently, like every 1 or 2 months, which, again, I know many black women that dye their hair on a regular basis. So part of this research turned from just interest in why hair coloring was so popular into a I don't want to say medical alert, but it is a medical alert. Like, I'm ringing the bell. I know black women who are hairstylists and work in salons, own salons, and I also know many brothers who work in the barbershop and own barbershops. And I don't know how much of this information gets to them. Now, again, I want to preface this by saying that in all of the research that I did on this, each time it did say that this is most common when permanent dyes are being used or there's a high frequency of hair dye being used. Now, there are alternatives in terms of hair dyes, right? Because each hair dyes have various chemicals in them. I'm not going to get into that. Again, that's a whole nother conversation and podcast. But there are vegetable oil-based hair dyes as well, which are more natural. Now, they don't hold the color the way, obviously, a commercial grade hair dye would, but based on all of the research, it definitely minimizes the exposure to the level of chemicals that you will find in many of these commercial-based dyes. So what's the takeaway? I think this information is important to get out to everyone, as many people as possible. And take precaution. Just take as many precautions as you can. Do your research before you use these dyes. If you have friends or family that, work in salons and barbershops and are hairstylists and barbers, if they don't know, get the word out to them, because sometimes you can work in an industry and you just don't know some of the dangers that come along with it. And so, definitely pass this information along. So I hope this was informative. I know it was informative for me. As always, dreams are not just for sleeping. Please wake up and live your dreams. My name is Trey Evans, the people's voice. Tell somebody about the dream. Salute. I am Trey Evans, the people's voice.